Doing something a little different today. Going to go through about 2,100 years of military history. Going to be fun, huh, Dasher?
Too soon. You came back at half the time. Got away from him a little bit. Sailed it a little bit. Can you blame time? You can't put over Sneaks got hold of him.
This is the Roman Gladius. It was used by all Roman centurions. It was standardized. They made millions of them. If a guy broke his, he could find one on the battlefield that felt exactly the same way. Probably one of the first standardized weapons, which is what the Romans were really good at in warfare, was coming up with a plan to do it. I made this, I just threw it together to talk about changes. And one of the big changes I want to talk about is brought to my mind by my favorite podcast, which is by Dan Carlin. It's called Hardcore History. And he did one where he compared Caesar's 53 BC army that went ashore in the British Isles. He said, what if that army had to face William the Conqueror's army that went ashore in 1066? What would actually happen? And to cut a long story short, William doesn't do very well. And that's because of Roman tactics. But it's interesting because they're separated by 1,100 years. And technology didn't get any better than this. There were a few incremental things, but this was an iron blade. And it was a very formidable weapon. They had pretty much the same kinds of things, bigger swords, but then you swung less. So it was interesting that 1,100 years of history, not much changed. But then now we go to the 20th century. And I made this last week. We talked about it. This is the M4, Fokker M4. It could go about 85 miles an hour. It could, if conditions were perfect, get up to maybe 10,000 feet. Its main job was to gather reconnaissance. It could fly over the enemy lines and look and see what everybody was doing, and then occasionally the pilot could throw a couple grenades down on the enemy lines, on the French and British lines, and fly back home. And he might have to fight another plane that was of similar speed and so forth of this one, with his single 30 caliber machine gun, Spandau machine gun. The big innovation was that machine gun could fire through the propeller without hitting the propeller. Made out of canvas and wood, mostly. This is in 1915 and is the pinnacle of aviation in 1915, which is pretty amazing. It's only 11 years after the first flight. So we look at that, and now we're just going to go 100 years. Not 1,000 years, not 1,100 years. Less than 10% of the time that separated Caesar and William the Conqueror, we've gone from this, 85 miles an hour and 10,000 feet, to the F-22 Raptor. And multiple armies have their super planes now. The Chinese have one, the Russians have one. They can occasionally get off the ground. We have this one. We also have the F-35, and the British have the Eurofighter. This plane can go to 60,000 feet, 65,000. It can go to 60,000 feet in about 1 minute, okay? It can fly 1,500 miles per hour, twice the speed of sound. It can do that completely stealthy. Now, of course, this plane, they didn't even have radar yet. This plane, we've had radar, and it can't be seen on the radar. So, pretty amazing amount of technology has gone into this. Plane has many different roles: reconnaissance, air-to-air combat, so forth. But it's also capable in here of carrying the B-61 Mark 12, couple of them, nuclear weapon. Tactical nuclear weapon that could be used to, let's say, go back 100 years. You could drop that on the German lines at Verdun and wait till everything cooled off, and you'd have about a 10-mile wide corridor that was never able to be made through artillery with these bombs, and the French and British troops could just walk right through, and the war to end all wars would be over with right then. Of course, you could do it even quicker by just having this plane fly to Berlin, drop the bombs on Berlin, and fly home. War's over with. So the changes that we have seen in just 100 years are astounding to me when you look at what human history has been for most of it. And this was an innovation at one time. This is where we are now. And I'm going to say I think we're done. Human-driven aviation is over with this airplane and the various equivalents of it. Everything now is going to go to drones. We have peaked with the F-22, and from now on, this plane and planes similar to it are going to have to worry about a drone or multiple drones taking it down. So anyway, that's my video for this week, comparing what's gone on in the 20th century to how small and incremental changes were before, and showing you this, what is arguably the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world, and probably the last fighter aircraft.
Good job, Boo.
Thank you, babe.